Welcome. I am Suzanne Hannafin with Acumen Executive Search, and I'm really excited today to have Phil Chun join us in our Hire for Good podcast. This is leadership profile of leadership, and where we really dive into what is leadership and what makes a good leader. So, welcome, Phil.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so Phil is a leadership consultant and an executive coach. After many years in human resources and organizational development in corporate America, Phil has started his own entrepreneurial consulting practice, Polaris Leadership Consulting. And beyond working with leaders and organizational development, Phil also sits on a number of boards. He is with the Korean American Chamber of Commerce of Oregon, and also advocates for life skills and opportunity. Welcome, Phil. I know I did a very condensed bio.
Mhm.
So why don't you take it from here and kind of walk us through this journey, especially going from corporate America
Mhm.
to an entrepreneurial startup?
Yeah, happy to share. Well, I like to call myself an HR survivor. So a quick shout out to anybody who is still in the HR field in any kind of HR position. You are all doing the Lord's work. I appreciate you all. I did not make it past almost a decade of being an HR leader. But during my time as an HR leader, I learned quite a bit about leadership development, what it looked like to, how important it was to have great leaders. And whether that be personal experiences of being on a director level position for an organization, and also providing training for managers, new managers, writing management development programs at the different organizations I was at. The emphasis on how important it was to have effective leaders was something that followed me along the HR journey. And to make a long story short, early in 2020, I went through my own existential crisis and decided to leave corporate HR because originally it was my dream to climb the corporate HR ladder and become a CHRO and all those kinds of things. But I found after almost 10 years in HR, it just wasn't for me. And so after months of therapy and eating Costco-sized bags of hot Cheetos and trying to evaluate my whole life, really landed on the thing that I love most, which is working with leaders, developing leaders, and providing management training for leadership.
No, it's funny. I too was a corporate, you know, ladder climber
Mhm.
and decided to leave that and do my own business. But I always wonder how to start. Like, again, not starting your own business, but when you come into an organization, how do you start the assessment and know where to begin working with these leaders?
Yeah, it's such an important question. I think this is something that, at least at Polaris, especially over the years as I've run my business, it's something that I've gotten better at. I think the key piece when I enter into any organization is really understanding the perspective and philosophy of upper management. With any kind of organizational change or change management, it really is the leaders that set the tone and the pace for the kind of change they want to make. And so it's critical for me and our team at Polaris to really understand the mindset of the people at the top. Why do they do what they do? What kind of change are they looking for? And in our work, when it comes to leadership development, what do they want to accomplish with equipping their leaders? What is the ultimate outcome? Is it just preparing for an acquisition, or is it really for growth? Is it for stabilization? What is the ultimate goal in wanting to develop the leaders? And all of that really begins with the perspective of the CEO or COO, whoever it is at the top, that really wants to initiate some of this training and potential change.
Yeah, you're speaking my love language, to be honest, because culture is starts at the top,
Mhm.
and it not only does it set the tone, but it gives the organizations the guidelines of what is acceptable and what's not acceptable.
Sure.
So I'm a big believer. So you start with the culture,
Mhm.
you understand the goals,
Mhm.
And then you can put into practice what change they want to see. Yeah.
Yes.
No, it makes total sense. And I would imagine every engagement is different.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, we have our menu of services that we provide in our internal frameworks, but absolutely, every engagement is different because, no organization is the same, even if they're in the same industry. And I imagine, especially, in the work that you guys do with executive search firms, you can hire for a COO or a CFO or whatever it might be, and the title and the job description might more or less be the same, but the stage of the company, the number of people in the company, and really what their goals are, even down to the personality of the executive team that you're trying to plug into, really vary and can be very different. So we make sure to ensure that uh, we customize what we're trying to do specific to the people within that organization.
Yeah, it makes sense. Well, and along your personal journey,
Mhm.
we've all had these really formative experiences, whether it's with a
Yeah.
mentor or a failure that we've learned. And
Mhm.
what are some of those formative experiences that you've had?
Yeah, there are two really formative experiences that stand out, and admittedly, they're on both ends of the spectrum. So I'll share the first one. One of the first jobs I had coming out of college was working on a day program for adults with developmental disabilities, and I was there for 7 years. And over my time there, that was actually where my love for people development began. Both in terms of the clients that we served, of working with adults with developmental disabilities, teaching them different life skills, behavior intervention, and things like that. But also, maybe more importantly, the CEO, who was the founder and operator for that business, really believed and breathed in her DNA and everything that she did, how the people in the organization, the culture of the organization, and having a team, a high trust team, really impacted my perspective on what it meant to run an organization well. And over the time that I was there, I was fortunate to be a part of their growth process. So it started with kind of a half day service. We doubled our service size and model, and then we eventually expanded to other locations. So it was really formative because I was able to see her grow the DNA of high trust, high growth culture, people at the forefront, and do that really well and be a part of the executive team that was able to do that. And so, deeply formative time. What happened though after, as I started to go into more corporate, and this is probably not too much of a surprise, is one of the last corporate jobs that I had was uh, one of the worst personal experiences that I've ever had. Now, I was getting paid the most I'd ever been paid from a salary perspective. It was a company that, at least where I was living, was pretty well known. So, there was a lot of pride, a lot of ego in being the director of HR there. But it was probably the most dysfunctional executive team and organizational culture that I've been a part of. And in many ways, it was deeply formative because I had firsthand experience as a leader and as an employee in the organization of what it felt like to be at a place that was really dysfunctional. And so much of what I learned about what to do, what not to do, what works and what doesn't work, even in that workplace, and even how to create small pockets of trust in a deeply dysfunctional environment, was an extremely formative time, especially for me now as a consultant, where I can proudly say that I've been on both ends of the spectrum, right? I've got the scar tissue to prove and show what it feels like to present in an executive team meeting and be totally embarrassed and beat down. I've got the experience to show of what it looks like to be part of an executive team that deeply cares for each other and hold each other accountable and is able to live in that nuance. So those are two really extreme experiences that were really formative to my perspective on work and what I do now.
And so let's continue on this. You go into an organization, and whether it's highly experienced people or new managers, because I know you have an expertise working with new managers and
Mhm.
developing them up. So, what advice would you give them? And how are you able to communicate that? And more importantly, how are they able to operationalize it?
Yeah. I think at the end of the day, with any position you have, especially as a manager, your performance is such a key component of even being able to influence anything beyond your job. And so, a great framework that I like to use, especially when we're working with new managers, is an acronym PIE, Performance, Image, and Exposure. And this isn't something that I made up myself. It is a framework that was presented by a management consultant years ago that I'm blanking on the name of, and hopefully I can add into the show notes. But basically, to break it down, performance is what it means to win every day from a very tactical perspective. Your metrics, your KPIs, your OKRs, and you have to start there. You have to be good at the very technical aspects of your job. And so for new managers, we spend quite a bit of time in helping them gain clarity on what those metrics are, what those goals are. From that, we start to dive into their image. And this is essentially how people experience you, right? So this dives into everything from what you wear, how you want to present yourself, your tone, your volume, your cadence. If you're early to meetings, how you manage meetings, how you give feedback and receive feedback, because that really does complete the experience of how you want to be perceived. And last but not least, E stands for exposure, which essentially is, are you at the right place at the right time, especially dependent on the phase of the organization. So a really oversimplified example is some people micromanage, right? That would be an overexposure of yourself as a manager. And some managers will become totally invisible, right? They seem to not be present. They seem to not be available. And finding that balance dependent on what the team needs is critical. And so for new managers, a really easy framework we use is that performance, image, and exposure to help them understand what it means to be successful.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I can apply that and operationalize that at all levels of the organization, not just in
Mhm.
leadership, but how do you show up to your job every day? I love that. That's an incredible way of thinking
Mhm.
it through. So here you've gone, you've had this career in corporate.
Mhm.
You're in a successful consulting practice right now. What advice would you give your 20-year-old self?
Man, so much. I think probably the first one would be to surround yourself with really good people. At least for me, when I was in my 20s, I thought I was the best. I
I
thought I
think
knew
we
that.
all did.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I thought I knew everything. Highly confident, high ego. And what was really interesting about that time, and something that I don't know if I share often, is I was also very lonely. Especially as an early manager. And so this weird experience of high ego, high confidence, also feeling really lonely can create a really strange experience as you go through your 20s. And so if there was anything I could really push my 20-year-old self to do, would be to find a community of people that would continue to invest in me and hold me accountable and give me different ideas and perspectives on how to live life, whether professionally or personally. And it doesn't have to be a mentor or anything like that. It could just be a group of friends who are kindred spirits that share your values. But I think creating that community of people and doing it together is probably something I would really emphasize to my younger self.
Well, and I'm glad you brought that up and the vulnerability of that, because even having your own business,
Mhm.
that's lonely in itself also. So how do you build community today?
Yeah, being a business owner is a really strange experience, and I know that it's something you can relate to. The way I would describe it is at any hour of the day, you can be on one end of the spectrum. This morning at 9 a.m., and my business is going well, but at 9 a.m., I applied to an HR job out of panic, right? And I'm not going to take that job, but just in that one moment, it was like it would be much easier just to get paid a salary and have PTO and all those things. But the next hour at 10 a.m., I had a great client session and I feel on top of the world and I feel like I'm living my life stream. And so that experience of being an entrepreneur and business owner is kind of a crazy extreme experience. Um, to answer your actual question, I've been really fortunate, especially here in the Portland community, to find a group of entrepreneurs that I meet with regularly. That kind of what I was saying before about community is willing to invest in me, provide, share their thoughts, their frameworks, and hold me accountable. And really, at the end of the day, help me feel a little less lonely about feeling like this crazy person on this entrepreneurial journey. And I think when you start even Googling entrepreneurship networking groups, there are actually quite a few out there that exist. And so, I'm deeply appreciative of the entrepreneur community that I'm a part of.
Absolutely. Well, I tell you, Phil, it's interesting to me listening to people's journeys and and then seeing their success when you take that leap. And not everybody has that risk tolerance
Mhm.
of just doing it. So good for you.
Thank you.
Well, as you know, this podcast is Hiring for Good,
Mhm.
which has a lot of different connotations. So I want to ask, what does hiring for good mean for you?
It's a great question. And having heard your podcast before, the different episodes, I know people have given lots of different answers. I would say my take on what comes to mind when I hear hiring for good is um, years ago when I started to journey down the HR journey. I was fortunate to work with an HR consultant named Ron Smedley, and he was very formative in training me technically, but also philosophically on my perspective on HR. And I remember one time I had asked him, Ron, what's your philosophy when it comes to hiring? And he sat back and he thought about it for a moment, and he responded with, always try and hire people who are better than you. That philosophy has really stuck with me. And for me as a firm owner, for the team that I've hired around me, the fellow consultants that I partner with, I can confidently say that in many ways they are much better at that their job than I am as a coach and a consultant. And I'm a very confident consultant. I feel I'm very good at what they do. But I'm fortunate because I have been able to hire people who are better than me. And within that, they all have the value and perspective of learning together. So we have really animated and wonderful discussions about how we could have approached the client more effectively, how we could run our sessions more effectively, maybe areas that we need to improve on. And so really hiring for good again means for me surrounding yourself with people who are better than you at different aspects of their job, so that as a collective they can make a greater impact in whatever it is they're trying to do.
Oh, absolutely. Again, you're speaking my language right
Mhm.
there. And it shows that again, I think a good consultant always comes in with that sense of humility, which
Mhm.
you are definitely, showing. So the ego
Yeah.
of 20 years old is now the wisdom of
Mhm.
of all those years put to practice. Well, I tell you, Phil, this has been fantastic, and there's been so much learnings throughout this very short conversation. All of Phil's contact information and how to reach him is, at the end of this. But I just want to say thank you. I truly do appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's honored to be here, especially with all the interesting people you've interviewed. So I'm honored to be a part of that roster.
Oh, awesome. So contact Phil. He's such, well, you've heard from him. All right. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.